Let's talk about lysosomes. All right. So, lysosomes have a single membrane and they're made by the Golgi. What do? So, these are very simple things. Single membrane made by the Golgi. Let's talk about their function. So, your structure is already done. All right. Lyse means to break or cut. So these are full of chemicals that are able to break down or degrade things within the cell. So this could be something your cell needs to digest, or something that is maybe toxic to the cell that is going to break down into simpler substances that are not as toxic or non-toxic. So what kind of things could we break down? Well, there are lysosomes for every occasion, okay? You have lysosomes to break down fat, protein, your polysaccharides, which are sugars, and your nucleic acids. Now, does anybody recognize those four things? They're all the major categories of macromolecules. So there's lysosomes for every occasion. Good job over there. Every macromolecule. All right, let's jump. So when we say for every occasion, we're talking about 40 different known occasions. So there's only four categories. Why so many? There are lysosomes that can break down particular groups of these. So pretty simple stuff. And you don't have to know that there's 40, but that's just kind of cool to know. All right, here's a close-up, kind of a zoomed in. With a nucleus would be here. You've got vesicles, you've got the Golgi, and it can make lysosomes. Okay, now pay attention to which way things are going. Okay, there's some terminology here. Autophagy means self-eat, okay? So this lysosome is full of some sort of product that's going to break down, maybe a protein, maybe a fat. And once it breaks it down, you can kind of see it's in that compartment. And so after that, it'll be digested, which you can kind of see here. So that's things inside the cell. Now the cell itself is eating stuff over here. So you have autophagy, and then you have phagocytosis. Okay, so those are kind of like internal and external. Phago means to eat. There's a rare condition pregnant women get called geophagy, where they crave dirt and they'll eat dirt. So you can kind of hear geo for earth. It is a real thing. You might see it on My Strange Addiction, but it happens to a lot of women. Some of them will crave soap powder, like powdered Tide. Geophagy is just like another word with phagy in it, and it's when people crave dirt, they'll go out and they'll have a sort of a compulsion to eat dirt. That is weird. All right, weird things happen during pregnancy. Here's another cartoon. You can kind of see this is outside the cell over here. That's that phagocytosis. You're bringing something into the cell that wants to be digested, or needs to be digested, I should say. You have membranes joining membranes, and then the things that need to be digested are broken down into simpler simpler substances. All right. Here's auto. One of the more common labs you can do is you can take cells, expose them to peroxide. There are peroxisomes that will break that down because it's toxic. Okay, too much peroxide in a cell. When peroxide bubbles, it's basically breaking down blood cells and giving off a gas. So, peroxide can be really toxic. Usually the peroxide you put on your cuts and stuff, it cleans them out because it's toxic, but it also has, it's only like 2 or 3%. Okay, if you get like really high concentrations of peroxide, you're talking like rocket fuel. My daughter did a lab earlier this week at her school where she got high concentration of peroxide on her skin. It turned her skin all white for a day or so. All right. A little bit more on lysosomes. They are important in cell death. Okay? You've probably heard of this cancer where cells grow out of control and they don't undergo what's like planned cell death called? Autoapoptosis. Very good. So if your cells are missing certain enzymes, that can be the cause of a lot of genetic enzyme diseases. So there'll be things that people with these diseases can't break down. So these people can't digest certain types of foods. Okay? And here's some examples. People with Tay-Sachs usually don't live very long. Okay? I'm not familiar with this other one here, Pompei's disease. All right, let's do vacuoles real quick, and then we'll end this segment. Vacuoles are one really big membrane that can take up a lot of space in a cell. Okay, way bigger than the little guys the Golgi gives off. Okay. The function depends on where you find them. So different organisms use them for different things. And we'll talk about those. Whoops. So this section here is going to break out into 2 subsections. So you don't really have to write this right now. I'm just telling you where we're going. You don't have to write this right now if you're a note taker. Try to let you know where we're going. All right, so let's look at the functions in 2 different types of creatures here. So protists, if you forgot what those are your little single-celled organisms. And they have what are called contractile vacuoles. And this is just like contracting a muscle, okay? It will squeeze extra water out of the cell. Protists also have food vacuoles. And when they eat something, they store it in there until they have time to break it down. It's kind of like if you went out and ate an all-you-can-eat whatever. It's not like you're going to digest that as soon as it gets to your stomach. It takes, Thanksgiving dinner, okay? It just takes time to digest that. All right, here's a picture of one. And this one's contractile. And there's also some over here that we're talking about for digestive. And so that's your little single cell guy. You can kind of see he's got cilia all over him to move all around. We'll talk a little bit more about that as part of this lecture. All right, what do plants use vacuoles for? A plant, if this is a plant cell, they'll often have one really big vacuole that can take up almost the whole cell full of water. Okay. This vacuole has a special name for its membrane called tonoplast. So that would be like the outside layer of this. Okay, so they call this sometimes the central vacuole. It's just water, okay? So it's separating out everything else that's going on inside the cell as this water storage area, okay? Now, if you have house plants, and I'm pretty terrible at taking care of mine, if you forget to water your nice pretty little plant, okay, after a couple days, what happens to it? What do we call it? It wilts, okay? So it looks pretty rough. What the plant has done is used up all this water, so it's kind of like a balloon, okay? The plant will sort of stand up when it's full of water, but if you don't water it, it has to rely on its stored water, and it becomes all wilted. Of course, there's a point where if you don't get water back into it, it's done. But a lot of wilted plants, you water them, they'll pop right back. Okay, it just depends on the plant and how long you've waited. All right, so what do? They regulate water in plants, which, if an animal's thirsty, it'll just go look for water. A plant doesn't have that option, okay? It also stores ions, okay? So in that water, there could be dissolved sodium, whatever. Now, we also see, this is kind of getting into sort of what I call level 3 knowledge. And I'm not as much of a plant guy as I am sort of a human guy when it comes to examples, but there are pigments that are hydrophilic that end up inside of these vacuoles. So if you have red and blue flower petals, that's where they would show up. These are not the pigments that change in the fall, okay? So that's a little bit different. These are very specialized for flowers. So if you give your loved one a red rose, you can tell them, that it's red because of the hydrophilic pigments in the vacuoles. And they'll be more attracted to you because you're so intelligent. All right, let's look at some further functions. This is what we were talking about with wilting. Okay, they can enlarge the cells to give the plants some structure. We call that turgor pressure. They can also store enzymes in there. That's supposed to say wilting, but it didn't come out very well. If the plant's exposed to toxins, it can also isolate them in there. We're getting into some pretty specialized functions here. And like we said, it can be used for coloration. And just remember, coloration is an adaptation to attract pollinators. It's not just like well, I'm going to grow this way because I'm pretty. Okay. Now, humans have crossbred certain flowers and tulips and violets and things like that for their own purposes. But plants out in the wild are colored to attract pollinators. Usually bees or some other insect. But it can also, hummingbirds are pollinators too.